making mistakes, bringing those mistakes to the surface, diagnosing them to get at their root causes, designing new and better ways of doing things, systematically implementing the changes, making new mistakes, and so on. This iterative evolutionary approach allowed us to continually refine the investment systems that I'd begun building in 1982. Principles, Ray Dalio, it's so wonderful having you today. Let's get into it and see what we can learn from Ray Dalio today. We're up to chapter 5, so a new chapter starting today. Here we go. So up until this point, we've been talking about his life a little bit. We've been talking about Ray Dalio's company, how he lost it, and then he still had one employee left, and that was himself. And then he rebuilt it, and where his ideas and principles came from. And we've learned a few of those principles, and now we're going into the ultimate boon, 1995 to 2010. By 1995, Bridgewater had grown to 42 employees and 4.1 billion under management, which was more than I'd ever hoped for, especially considering that Bridgewater had been down to just me only a dozen years before. While things were much better and more stable, we were still doing basically the same things I'd been doing from the start. Wrestling with the markets, thinking independently, and creating creative. I don't think that's correct. Thinking independently and creatively about how to make our bets, making mistakes, bringing those mistakes to the surface, diagnosing them to get at their root causes, designing new and better ways of doing things, systematically implementing the changes, making new mistakes, and so on. This iterative evolutionary approach allowed us to continually refine the investment systems that I'd begun building in 1982. Back then, we showed that a few bright guys with computers could beat the big, well-equipped established players. Now we were becoming the well-equipped establishment ourselves. As the number of decision rules and the amount of data in our systems grew more complex, we hired young programmers who were better than us in converting our instructions into code, and smart new grads right out of college to help with our investment research. One of these new whiz kids, Greg Jensen, joined Bridgewater as a college intern in 1996. Because he shined, I grabbed him as my research assistant. Over the decades that followed, he contributed a lot, grew into the co-chief investment officer role with Bob Prince and me, and became a co-CEO. He also became like a godson to me. We also invested in more and more powerful computers. Having our systems running through those machines freed us to get above the daily movements of the markets and consider things from a higher level, where we could make novel, creative connections that produced innovations for our clients. So always, there's a graph that I used to have that one of my business coaches used to give, and it said, make a decision, set a goal, and then execute, and then evaluate and have a look at what worked and what didn't work, then make changes and adjust, and then set new goal, implement, see if it's working, see what's good and what's not so good about it, and implement changes. And you continue that cycle to continuously be improving. Discovering inflation indexed bonds. Around this time, I had dinner with David White, man in charge of the Rockefeller Foundation's money. David asked me how I would engineer the foundation's portfolio to produce a return that was 5% above the US inflation rate. I answered that a portfolio of leveraged foreign inflation indexed bonds with the currency hedged back to US dollar should deliver exactly that. The bonds needed to be foreign because there was no US inflation index bonds at the time, and they needed to be hedged to the dollar so there would be no currency risk. Now, if any of that doesn't really make sense, it's really important to take everything from this book and to start studying and thinking about how it all fits together. So inflation is when, well, we're going through inflation right now, and there are bonds, for example, that will rise and fall in interest rates based on what the inflation is doing, so that you are able to still make money based on the inflationary periods, so that you are making more as inflation goes up, and you are still making the same amount approximately when inflation goes down. But then you hedge it with currencies in order to be able to make sure, since they are foreign, that you are not losing money on the exchange rate. because if I am buying something foreign and it is worth, let's say, $1 today, but then later it becomes worth 50 cents, but inflation has gone up, so it's still gone up, but I'm losing money on the currency, then you also need to buy currency in order to be able to protect yourself from that currency drop. So the more you can start to put those things together, and we might have to make a video about that. Let me make a note about that. Exchange rates and things. Because I'm sure a lot of people would have lots of questions about exchange rates and how all of that works, and inflation index bonds. There we go. This is great. This gives us some topics. And if you have questions at the end, I'll share how you can get in touch with me and ask your questions as well. But we'll make some videos on those because I think everybody would benefit greatly from that. And thank you to everybody that's sending the hearts. Heart Lucky has been sending lots and lots, and they just keep flying up over the screen, which is really, really nice. Really appreciate you being here and sharing all the love. Okay. Thinking about this later, I realized that we could create an entirely new and radically different asset class. So Dan Bernstein and I researched such a portfolio more closely. According to our analysis, this new asset class would perform even better than we thought. In fact, it would be uniquely effective because we could engineer it to have the same expected return as equities, but with less risk and with a negative correlation with bonds and equities over long time frames. We showed this research to our clients and they loved it. Before long, we became the first global inflation index bond manager in the world. In 1996, US Treasury Department Deputy Secretary Larry Summers began looking into whether the US should issue its own inflation index bonds. And because we were the only manager with a portfolio of such bonds, he called us in as experts. Dan and I traveled down to Washington to meet with Summers, his Treasury colleagues, and a number of representatives from well-known Wall Street firms. We were late. Punctuality isn't one of my strengths, and the doors to the big meeting rooms at Treasury were locked. I wasn't going to let that stop me, so I knocked until someone opened it. It was a large room with a table in the middle and a press gallery off to the side. There was only one seat open at the table, and it had Dan's nameplate in front of it. We'd agreed that he'd be our one allowed representative since he'd done a lot of the prep work. I had forgotten that. So I walked over to the press gallery, grabbed the chair, and carried it next to Dan so I had a seat at the table too. Dan describes that meeting as an analogy for what it was like for us in the 90s in general. We had to barge our way into things. Larry Summers has since said that the advice he got from us was the most important in shaping this market. When the Treasury did create the bonds, they followed the structure we recommended. So lots of really interesting things there. One, make sure that you learn as much as you can about these things that we are talking about. So we're going to do a video about exchange rates and inflation index bonds. So that'll be really good. And the other is that you want to be able to learn as much as possible. If you are interested in investing, if you are interested in real estate, if you're interested in business, take some time every day to do some research, to just study, to immerse yourself in what it all means, how it works, how it functions. So at the moment, I am doing some investing, and every day I take a little bit of time and I'll do some research on it. And I will ask the questions and I will figure out what fits together or what doesn't fit together and what works and what doesn't. I have a practice account. I use that to test different theories. And over time, it just works really, really well. So the other one is that you need to know what you want to achieve and you need to go for it. So in this case, he has this opportunity to have this Treasury Secretary meeting and he gets locked out and he just keeps knocking because he knows what he wants. He wants to get into the room. He's going to find a way no matter what. So first knocking, I'm sure even if they wouldn't have opened the door, he would have found another way to do it. And then when he gets inside, there's no chair for him. So he just takes a different chair and still sits at the table. And eventually people are really happy that he does that. So if you believe in yourself, if you believe that you have something of value, don't let people hold you back from sharing that value. Find a way, no matter what, to be able to put your input and to be able to give what you need to give to everybody who you need to give it to. Because if you have done the research, if you've done the study, if you have practiced and learned what you need to learn, if you have the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise, you need to go out and share it with people. Discovering risk parity. By the mid-1990s, I had enough money to set up a trust fund for my family. So I began to think about what the best asset allocation mix for preserving wealth over generations would look like. In my years as an investor, I had seen all sorts of economic and market environments and all kinds of ways that wealth could be created and destroyed. I knew what drove asset returns, but I also knew that no matter what asset class one held, there would come a time when it would lose most of its value. This included cash, which is the worst investment over time, because it loses value after adjusting for inflation and taxes. I also knew how difficult it was to anticipate the swings that caused those losses. I've devoted my life to it, and I've made my share of bad calls. Anticipating these swings wasn't something I'd bet on others doing well when I wasn't around. Finding investors who have done well in all economic environments, when inflation rises and when it falls, when there are booms and when there are busts, is like finding needles in a haystack, and they don't live forever, so that's not a viable path. I didn't want the wealth I had created to protect my family to be wiped out after I was gone. That meant I had to create a mix of assets that could be good in all economic environments. I knew which shifts in the economic environment causes asset classes to move around, and I knew that those relationships had remained essentially the same for hundreds of years. There were only two big forces to worry about: growth and inflation. Each could either be rising or falling. So I saw that by finding 4 different investment strategies, each one of which would do well in a particular environment: rising growth with rising inflation, rising growth with falling inflation, and so on, I could construct an asset allocation mix that was balanced to do well over time while being protected against unacceptable losses. Since that strategy would never change, practically anyone could implement it. And so with the help from Bob and Dan, I created a portfolio mix that I could comfortably put my trust money in for the next 100 years or more. I called it the all-weather portfolio because it could perform well in all environments. Between 1996 and 2003, I was the only client investing in it because we didn't sell it as a product. But in 2003, the head of Verizon's pension fund, a longtime client, told us he was looking for an approach to invest that would do well across all environments. After Verizon made its investment, others quickly followed, and a dozen years later, we were managing nearly 80 billion. It was another industry-shaping concept. Seeing its success, other investment managers followed with their own versions. It is now generically called risk parity investing. Okay, so that has been another really interesting section. So there are ways to be able to hedge different things. The more you learn, the cleverer you are. So it's not that people are born clever. Everybody is born and starts out in nappies, for example, and doesn't really know anything. The difference lies in whether you are willing to go out and actually start researching, looking into, testing different strategies, just like I'm doing right now with some of my investing, and taking those lessons and looking for ways to improve. You do this with your business, you do this with investing, you do this with real estate, stocks. It doesn't matter what it is that you are doing. And then you surround yourself with experts who are going to be able to guide you and help you during that period in order to be able to help you to refine what it is that you're doing. And sometimes you need to pay for those services. And sometimes you have friends who are willing to just help out. So we're going to leave it at that one for today. See if I can find my bookmarks. And we will do some more reading tomorrow. If you enjoyed this and if you'd like to be able to watch the previous recording, because we record all of these and put them onto YouTube, we also have the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we also have The Art of Thinking Clearly, and we have lots of your questions that you sent through Instagram that we have been answering, which is really amazing. Then you can go to the Passive Cash Flow Club on YouTube and watch those recordings, watch those question and answer sessions. And some of those questions might be questions that you have. And if you don't find your question around investing or wealth creation, then feel free to send it to me. at Instagram, business_team_6_official. You'll be able to find me there, send me a message, and ask your question. And then make sure you subscribe at the Passive Cash Flow Club on YouTube, because then you'll be able to get a notification when your question has been answered, or when a new video is uploaded, and it might be another question that you haven't thought of, but that will be very useful to you in order to be able to achieve greater investment success. And finally, if you are interested in actually practicing these investment techniques and strategies, and if you want to take that first step, or if you want to improve your investing, we have a cash flow simulator which allows you to replicate your life and invest and trade and practice and do different things around business, stocks, real estate, etc. That is going to shift your mindset and help you to be able to either get started or improve and get better and create better strategies. So if you're interested in that, also get in touch on Instagram, business_team_6_official, and you'll be able to send me a message. Let me know that you're interested, and I'll get my VA, my virtual assistant, to send you a message letting you know when and where the next one is going to be. So I am very thankful that you have joined today. I am looking forward to another reading tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow for another reading. And remember to make the switch to unlock your rich. If you keep doing things the way you always have, nothing will change. But if you start implementing some things from these readings and from the lessons and questions and answers that we're going to be putting up on the YouTube channel, then you are going to be able to make that switch to unlock your rich. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll quickly jump on Bigo to see who has been sending things and joining us there.